You bump into someone on the street and apologize before you've even registered who moved first. Someone cancels plans on you and you apologize for being disappointed. You ask a question in a meeting and apologize before asking it. You set a boundary and spend the next 3 days apologizing for having set it. And somewhere underneath all of it is a quiet, persistent feeling that you are too much, too inconvenient, too present in spaces where you're not sure you're fully allowed to be. You probably know this about yourself. You've probably been told it's a bad habit. Maybe someone has pointed it out in a tone that made you say, sorry, for saying sorry. And you've tried to stop, more times than you can count. And it keeps happening anyway. That's the part worth understanding. Because when a pattern is that persistent, that automatic, that resistant to simple willpower, it's almost never actually about politeness. It's about something older than any social habit you've developed. The constant apology is a survival strategy. And once you see it that way, nothing about it looks like a bad habit anymore. In the mid-20th century, researchers began identifying something they called hypervigilance in people who had grown up in unpredictable or unsafe environments. The nervous system, when exposed to chronic stress in early life, doesn't simply return to baseline when the stress is over. It recalibrates. It learns to stay alert, to scan constantly for threat, to treat ambiguity as danger and peace as something temporary, waiting to be interrupted. In a child whose home environment was emotionally unpredictable, one specific version of hypervigilance develops, an attunement to the moods of others. So finely tuned, it operates before conscious thought. The child learns to read the temperature of a room the moment they enter it, to anticipate displeasure before it arrives, to smooth things over before they have the chance to go wrong. This is what therapist Pete Walker, in his work on complex trauma, named the fawn response. Walker described it as the fourth survival response, sitting alongside the more commonly known fight, flight, and freeze, where those three responses deal with threat through confrontation, escape, or stillness. The fawn response deals with threat through appeasement, through becoming whatever the threatening person needs you to be before the threat escalates. Walker's insight was that for a child whose primary source of danger is also their primary source of love, fighting back is too risky, escaping isn't an option, and freezing only delays the problem. The only available strategy is to make the dangerous person not dangerous by becoming helpful, agreeable, apologetic, and small, by removing your own needs from the equation entirely and making yourself easy to be around. The child who learns this strategy doesn't just survive on it. They get very, very good at it. And then they grow up, and the strategy travels with them into every room they enter for the rest of their lives. The apology isn't the strange part. It's a completely logical output of a nervous system that learned early and under real pressure that taking up space is risky and making others comfortable is how you stay safe. The strange part is the gap between where you are now and where that learning happened. You're not in that environment anymore, but the alarm that learned to fire there is still firing. In meetings, in restaurants, in text message threads, at exactly the same frequency as it did when it mattered. Psychologist Harriet Lerner, who spent decades studying apology and its distortions, drew a clear distinction between apologies that repair something real and apologies that function as reflexive social smoothing. The first kind names what actually happened, takes genuine responsibility, and makes a change. The second kind, what Lerner called the over-apology, is a pattern of apologizing for your own existence rather than for a specific harm you caused. It apologizes for having feelings, for asking for things, for being in someone's way. It is, she noted, almost always rooted in anxiety rather than in actual wrongdoing. The person over-apologizing isn't acknowledging harm. They're managing the fear that their presence might be received as harm. That distinction matters enormously because the over-apology doesn't function the way a real apology does. A real apology closes something. An over-apology opens a loop. It signals to the people around you that your default position is culpability, which over time teaches them to treat it that way. It also costs something internally. each time. A small abdication of the right to simply exist without justification. Here's the part that tends to come as a surprise. The constant apology often coexists with a very high standard for other people's behavior. People who over-apologize habitually are often quietly furious. Not loudly, not in ways they'd ever express openly, but underneath the smoothing and the sorry is a buildup of situations where they said sorry when they weren't sorry, deferred when they wanted to push back, shrunk when they wanted to take up space. The apology becomes a way of avoiding conflict in the moment at the cost of genuine self-expression over time. The anger doesn't disappear. It accumulates. This is the fawn response completing its own cycle. Because the appeasement strategy that kept things temporarily smooth also prevents the relationship from ever becoming honest enough to be truly safe. You can't find out whether a person will actually respect your needs if you never express your needs. You can't discover whether the conflict you're avoiding would have been survivable if you keep avoiding it. The very mechanism designed to keep you safe from rejection is also the mechanism preventing you from finding out how accepted you actually might be. The most common trigger for over-apologizing is conflict, or the anticipation of it. Before any actual tension exists, the apology arrives as a preemptive offering, a way of reducing the surface area available for disapproval. This feels like politeness, and sometimes reads as it to the other person. But underneath it, the nervous system is running the same calculation it learned in childhood. If I make myself smaller, the danger is less likely to come. Recognizing this pattern in yourself doesn't require revisiting every difficult moment of your childhood. It requires something simpler and harder at the same time. Noticing in real time the sensation that arrives just before the apology, the tightening, the small drop, the impulse to fill silence before it becomes disapproval. That impulse, caught early enough and often enough, gradually gives you access to a choice you didn't know you had. Not to suppress the apology, exactly, but to ask, before it leaves your mouth, whether something is actually yours to apologize for. The answer will sometimes be, yes, you did bump into them. You were late. You said something that landed wrong. Real apologies, given when something real has happened, matter. The goal isn't to stop apologizing altogether. It's to reserve the apology for when it means something, which requires being able to tell the difference between genuine responsibility and reflexive self-erasure. That difference is almost always felt in the body rather than the mind. A genuine sorry tends to come with a sense of landing, of rightness. The over-apology tends to come with a kind of bracing, a performance of smallness before anyone has asked for it. There's also a specific social pattern worth naming, because it can make this habit harder to break than it might otherwise be. The people around a chronic over-apologizer often come to rely on the smoothing without realizing it. They've never had to sit with the discomfort of conflict or ambiguity in your presence, because you've always resolved it preemptively. When you begin to stop, when you simply don't apologize for a need you expressed or a space you took up, there can be a strange friction, an unspoken expectation that you should have smoothed this over already. That friction isn't proof that you did something wrong. It's proof that the pattern was serving a function for both of you. Recognizing this doesn't mean cutting people off. It means understanding that changing the pattern will briefly make things feel less comfortable for everyone involved, including you, and that discomfort is not the same as damage. None of this changes quickly. A nervous system that spent years learning that your presence requires justification doesn't update that belief in a single conversation with yourself, but it does update gradually through the accumulation of moments where you held your position, expressed a need, or simply didn't apologize, and the predicted disaster didn't come. Each one of those moments is a small piece of evidence your nervous system files away, slowly replacing an old assumption with a newer, more accurate one. You were not too much. You were in an environment that didn't have room for you. That's not the same thing. And the apology you've been carrying for your own existence was never yours to give.